Okay, so with us today, we have the Athletics' David Ornstein. We've also got Carl Anka as well. David, there have been some massive signings, some big storylines so far in the transfer window. Now, you've been doing this for a while. Talk to me about this window in particular. How does it compare in terms of heat to other windows you've worked on?
Boiling. It's one of the hottest for sure. It's been a roller coaster, and there are stories that have happened and transfers that have materialized or not that feel like they were a different year, a different summer, a different market altogether. When we think back to the Arsenal situation with Sesko and Gyökeres, there was one I was reminding myself of earlier. I think Newcastle and Liverpool battling over Ekitike, Man United coming in, Man United and Newcastle battling over Sesko. I mean, it feels like we've entered a different chapter in the book. But yeah, it's been wild. The level of expenditure, the amount of conversations and situations that have been explored, the stuff that remains to be resolved is probably more fascinating than ever before in terms of unanswered questions going into the final days. Thank goodness it's a 7 p.m. cutoff on Monday, so we're not like burning the midnight oil and waiting for deal sheets at 1 or 2 in the morning, having been working since 1 or 2 in the morning. It's been long, it's been draining, it's been political. There have been a lot of agendas, egos, misinformation, different versions of events, players going on strike. Conspiracy theories have gone out of control this summer.
Oh my goodness me! Stay off X, people. Stay off X.
Yeah, when the door slams shut, we will be able to relax somewhat and return to something resembling normality. While you guys crack on, I'm going to take a quick call.
Brilliant. Well, I'm hoping this podcast isn't too arduous. Take your call because we're focusing on bomb squads today. The players that teams want to shift so they can balance the books. Let's have a start with Manchester United. Let's talk about their bomb squad. Garnacho, Sancho, Anthony, Malacia. And there's also another two I want to talk about as well. Højlund, Mainoo. Carl, let's start with Mainoo first. A piece has dropped on The Athletic today. Critchley and Laurie Whitwell have talked about his future at Manchester United. Does it surprise you that we are here with Mainoo? Because he hasn't played much at all.
No, he's not featured in the first 2 games for Manchester United, and it was discussed after the defeat to Arsenal on Talk of the Devils as to whether or not Mainoo should have come on as a substitute instead of Manuel Ugarte. The comment section is going, calm down, everyone. It's just been 1 game. Mainoo will feature plenty. You didn't feature at all against Fulham, which then provoked questions, both before the game. Ruben Amorim was asked about Mainoo and what he thought of him, and he said, he's a young player, he's still to develop, and there's going to be multiple phases in the season, and there'll be certain fixtures in which he'll feature. So the official expectation was Mainoo will get his time. We're talking right now ahead of a League Cup game against Grimsby Town, and that feels like a game where Mainoo will probably start along with Manuel Ugarte. Whether or not he's going to play consistent minutes, and I'm talking upwards of 1,500 minutes in this Premier League season, maybe, probably not, which if you are Mainoo and you were in the starting lineup for England in the Euros final and you are wanting to be the person who plays next to Declan Rice for England at the World Cup under Thomas Tuchel, that might be concerning. And that's created this situation, as reported by Laurie Whitwell and Mark Critchley, and with input from Adam Crafton and David Ornstein, that Mainoo is open to a move. And I think it's really important to look at this. He is open to a move. Manchester United are perhaps open to bids. So this is not necessarily a player agitating to leave through the front door or even the back door, but this is a case of the door isn't quite as locked as you'd imagine for a academy graduate of his talent. I'm a big Mainoo fan, and I think quite a few Manchester United fans are as well. And the idea that Mainoo might be sold for a fee anywhere between 45 million and 70 million probably irks a little bit, considering United, it's not necessarily a case of United needing to sell their midfield players, but actually they probably need to get a midfield player who can get the best out of Mainoo rather than sell Mainoo. So right now, very, very difficult situation. I know you just said stay off X. I think that's good advice. We call them e-Reds. So the online Manchester United fans are being very vociferous. Some are saying nothing's happening. Some are saying if Mainoo leaves, I'm leaving Manchester United. So as David Ornstein always likes to tell me, let's not do anything until the transfer window is closed before we do our assessment. And as David Ornstein very often likes to tell me, when the transfer window closes, he's often like tapped me on the shoulder going, it's still open in Turkey.
Okay, got you. I think we got that through. Another player I want to talk about, and maybe David, I'll come to you on this one first, is Rasmus Højlund. We've written in the deal sheet that there was obviously interest from Napoli. How likely is a player like that to go from Manchester United this summer?
I think it's unclear. Rasmus Højlund did not intend to leave this summer. Even after Benjamin Sesko was signed, he saw it as a challenge and something he wanted to emerge triumphant on. And so that presents a very difficult situation for Manchester United. I think Sesko would have come in expecting to have that role as his. So with nothing personal against Højlund, it's obviously not ideal for him that there's that competition in the same sort of profile and age bracket. And Man United probably can't or don't want to carry them both. And that's why options are being explored in terms of loan, maybe permanent. I don't know. It does seem to be that it's more loans with options, obligations. Lots of interest from lots of clubs in the UK, but also overseas. And we don't know of anything being close right now. You may have seen some reports suggesting that it is. That's not our information, but it doesn't mean to say that that won't come about in the next days heading towards the deadline. So do I see a move materialising for Rasmus Højlund? Yeah, I probably do. You know, he wasn't involved in the Arsenal fixture. I remember seeing him arrive at the ground separate to the rest of the squad. Not a nice situation for him to be in. Clearly, it's a bit of a shock for him. Yeah, it's not been an ideal couple of seasons, but he's a young player who does have, we think, high potential and qualities. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so much interest in him. But off the back of those campaigns, Man United clearly feel he's not the one for them. That's why they've brought in Sesko. That's why they're open to his departure, and it could bring in significant funds. I can't say with certainty that it will happen, but I think a solution is more likely to be found than not. And I don't envisage Højlund being sat at Man United until January. It doesn't feel like he's one of those bomb squad type players at other clubs who are going to be in that position. He's got so much to offer, and that makes me think it will, in a position that clubs need. We talk so often about how the supply of number nines is far inferior to the demand, and he's one who is available. I guess it rests on him now. Are you ready to go? Do you want to go? Where do you want to go? These are your options. Can we do something before the deadline? Probably yes, but not for certain.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough one, isn't it, in football, Carl? You've got someone who's been brought in and, you know, seeing the unveiling, the social media clips. Oh, yeah, here's our guy, finally. Got him from Atalanta. We saw all the clips on YouTube. 70-odd million spent on him. Season or so down the line, you're surplus to requirements. I mean, is there an argument that, yet again, a bit like Mainoo, the system doesn't work for a player of this ability?
I think Ornstein's really hit the nail on the head about the striker supply and demand. I often go back to an old quote from Arsene Wenger when he was the Arsenal manager and Arsenal were linked to Gonzalo Higuain. I can't remember which time because Arsenal were linked to him multiple times. But Wenger made a point about how he believed we were seeing a dearth in strikers because of the way European coaching at the time. I want to say this is 2010s, were coaching what was referred to as universality. So the idea that you'd have multifaceted players who could do loads of roles across the front three. And Wenger's idea, or his warning, was that we were coaching the number 9-ness or the strikerness out of players. And I believe the final quote was, we might have to start shopping more in South America to get strikers. What's happened since then is, well, you know, Germany win a World Cup with Mario Götze scoring the winning goal. Spain win Euros playing a false nine. But also now you've got sort of come out the other end where loads of teams are going, oh God, we actually need a big man. And you're seeing Erling Haaland, you're seeing Alexander Isak, but these big men aren't playing like traditional big men. They're playing, they're dribbling like they're 5'8". Isak in particular, Haaland's ability to do a couple of skill moves, very, very remarkable. One on talks when you look at Sesko is, oh wow, he's 6'5", but he's moving in a certain way. So this sort of, there was a dearth in strikers, and now everyone wants a big striker, but a big striker who can dribble, put Rasmus in a very awkward position. And you can look at quotes from Gasperini when Højlund leaves Atalanta, where Gasperini said, I would have liked to keep him one more season. There's still parts of his game he still needs to work on. And I think that striker shortage, or the need for strikers in top European clubs, meant Højlund had to move probably a bit early. And as many United fan will now be able to tell you, if you are a football player and you're a little bit raw, Manchester United might not be the best place for you to cook or get cooked. Or you end up getting cooked because you're a little bit raw. I need to work on the second draft of this analogy. I think Højlund has been, unfortunately, the victim of working in a football club that has been ruled by dysfunction for the last 5-10 years. If we often do this trick of, if Alex Ferguson was still in charge, how would Rasmus Højlund play? And it's like, well, Rasmus Højlund probably be a third choice striker, learning behind 2 or 3 more senior strikers as things develop. When Rasmus Højlund arrived, he had a back injury, but more or less had to be thrown into the deep end because Anthony Martial was injured and no longer fit for purpose, and Erik ten Hag needed the striker. So Højlund was being played. He was also being taken off in certain minutes because Ten Hag went, I had to take him off because I can't risk him getting injured. So he didn't really get into the rhythm. He scores 5 goals in the Champions League, but a horrible Champions League group stage where Andre Onana has a disaster. So that good bit of momentum doesn't really click. And I think Højlund is a very good example of the power of confidence, particularly when you're a striker. I've spoken to loads of ex-pros, and everyone said when they're feeling it and they're in a really good purple patch, they just, certain chances where you take 4 or 5 touches or 2 or 3 touches to control the ball, they don't need that additional touch because they know they're just in the flow. And there were definitely times in Højlund's first season where he eventually got into the flow. He gets a goal where the ball, I think Garnacho has a shot and it just sort of bounces in off Højlund's chest. And you're like, oh yeah, you're lucky now. But on the converse, last season, there were times where he would trap a ball and he tried to trap a ball and it wouldn't work. And I think towards the end of last season, it became very clear that if Højlund was to get his mind right, 1, he needed a holiday, and 2, he probably needed to go on loan or go somewhere else to put the pieces back together. And I think that's what's happened to Højlund. There is a football player in there. I saw enough of him in the Champions League group stages in 23-24, and I saw parts of him at the start of last season where he's got a goal against Bodo Glimt, and it was in the Europa League candidates for goal of the tournament. And just before the Europa League final, I'm looking at all these goals and I watched it and my jaw dropped at how good that goal was. He sort of juggles the ball on one leg and then hits it with the other. And I was shocked because I can't believe this is the same Højlund. And I think that's the problem, in that his confidence dropped at a time where United's business seems to be, let's do whatever is in our power to get back in the Champions League paces as soon as possible, because we cannot afford to have another season without European football. The time it takes to nurture Højlund isn't there anymore, and therefore he's been told to look towards his future elsewhere. It does feel to me that something changed during pre-season, because Højlund was playing a little bit during the US tour. In fact, he has a shot during the summer series where the ball comes to and hits it really early and it flashes over the crossbar, and you're thinking that's an inflection point. If that goes in and he gets that bit of confidence, maybe other people around him are going, there's something there we can work with. But he didn't play 3 of the preseason games of that tour. Wasn't in the match they scored against Arsenal and wasn't in the match they scored against Fulham. Bear in mind, these are games where Ruben Amorim is playing with a false 9, Mason Mount, or rotating with Cunha. So if you're a centre forward and you're not getting a match day squad because your boss is playing a midfielder and 2 number 10s behind him, it's probably your future needs to be elsewhere, which is a pity.
Yeah. Very quickly, Carl, I'm just looking online. There's a wonderful picture from 2024. You've got
February
Højlund,
2024.
Garnacho,
I know.
Mainoo, and here we are talking about the exits of these players. As a fan of Manchester United, is it sad to see that it just hasn't worked out?
Yes, I think it's particularly at a club like Manchester United that giving young players the opportunity is how Manchester United defines themselves. It's on the back of more than one Manchester United shirt, or in the nape of the collar, youth, courage, and success. That is one of the club mottos. And at the time, it looked to be Mainoo, Garnacho, and Højlund were gonna be the standard bearers of that for the foreseeable future. And then here we are, just over a year later. Mainoo isn't playing games. Garnacho is in the bomb squad. I'm going to say Garnacho isn't blameless in his position in the bomb squad. There are some mistakes that have been self-inflicted, and Højlund too. Football changes really, really quickly, and David's been working in this industry a lot longer than me, so he'll be able to give you other examples of players who've had a great season. You're thinking, oh yeah, that's it. They're going to be the be-all and end-all of this football club, only for them to be out of the manager's plans a year later. So it's a pity. I think one thing that Ineos have been trying to communicate since they've been in charge of sporting decisions at Manchester United is that while they're not going to be perfect, they're not afraid to iterate and change direction quickly. If they think something is a mistake, they're not going to let that mistake, and I'm going to use air quotes here, mistake or decision, linger. And they're going to try and change that very, very quickly. So if you are a Manchester United fan that perhaps got frustrated at fringe players staying at the club for far longer than you would have liked to. There are players like Victor Lindelof, who was a Manchester United player for probably a bit longer than he needed to be, or Eric Bailly, players who perhaps could have been sold or should have been sold, but eventually ran down their contracts and eventually left on a free. I think Ineos are trying to stop that and trying to move on very quickly and try and use those players to raise additional funds to get players who can better suit what they want to do. So I'm very torn in this situation. I genuinely thought it'd be a no-brainer that Mainoo would be a Manchester United player for the next decade. The fact that this is even being discussed is a little bit threatening to me, but we'll see.
Yeah, David, on the subject of Manchester United, any more incomings or outgoings in the final days of the transfer window?
I think there's a bit of attention being paid to this goalkeeping situation. Lamens is of interest. It's not as advanced as has been reported. Clearly, it's quite delicate because it might need somebody to leave. There's no takers, it seems, right now for Onana. He's also got the Africa Cup of Nations in the winter. Maybe a bit more chance of Alti Bayındır leaving in terms of maybe some interest from Turkey, etc. But none of this is set in stone. And so it's inconclusive, the goalkeeping situation. United's focus, I suspect, is more on outs right now. Anthony, there's some positive movement with Real Betis. Garnacho and Chelsea will probably happen on deadline day. Malacia, I'm sure, a loan could be sorted before the window shuts. And the one that's less certain is Jadon Sancho, because I'm sure there's lots of interest, but it has to be right for him. And it definitely doesn't seem that we're as close for resolution on that front as we are on some others. And so, yeah, let's remember that United still have January 2026 when they could do some of this business, and until June 30th, 2026 to meet their requirements, PSR, FFP in this accounting cycle. But the noises you're getting from around Old Trafford, having done quite a bit of incoming business so far, it's not that the door is closed to further additions. It's just that the priority now seems to be getting players to head in the opposite direction.
Arsenal and Chelsea have been very busy this window. Both are now looking to slim down their squad as well and get rid of the deadwood. So let's begin with Chelsea. Christopher Nkunku and Nicholas Jackson first up. David, thoughts on that?
Yeah, Nkunku is definitely unclear. There's going to be a lot of interest in such a high-quality player, and it's not worked out so well at Chelsea, which opens the door to opportunities. You know, we've seen Bayern linked with him. We've seen reported on that, and even Leipzig stepping up talks over a potential permanent deal. I think that was about a week ago, roughly, that we charted that on The Athletic. But there's no guarantee that will happen. And I think the Nkunku one is now linked to Xavi Simons. So if Nkunku happens, maybe Simons goes to Chelsea. If Nkunku doesn't happen to RB Leipzig, then maybe Simons doesn't. It could be a late one. Plausible, nothing happens. I don't have info on things being advanced on Nkunku yet. Jackson, I do expect to leave. Again, not set in stone, but there's a very good chance of it because there's so much interest in him. Chelsea are willing to let him go, most likely either permanent or loan with obligation to buy. I don't see how there would be a way back given Chelsea's recruitment. And for him and his career, it seems like he's open to these possibilities, whether it be a Bayern or a Juve or a Newcastle or an Aston Villa or somebody else. There's strong interest in him from the UK, from abroad. Chelsea's financial demands will be a factor in this. Aston Villa, for example, really like him. Unai Emery's worked with him at Villarreal, but they don't know if they can afford it. If it's a loan, Chelsea will want a significant loan fee, no doubt. If it's a permanent, how high is that going to be? Can clubs afford it? And so let's see, because Chelsea were always looking to make a decision on this after the Newcastle-Liverpool game because there's so much striker movement, Isak, Wissa, Strand Larsen, etc. And Jackson falls into that bracket. That match is now out of the way. So that's why you're seeing so many links and reports around Jackson. It's highly possible that something develops before the deadline on him.
Carl, I'm also looking at some other players here. Disasi, Tyreek George, Ben Chilwell, Raheem Sterling. I mean, Sterling and Chilwell are on bumper contract. Can that also be an obstacle as to why certain teams don't come in and buy?
Absolutely. Big wages and players north of, let's say, 26. Very often, I'm talking Premier League players now, to be very specific, Premier League players within the top 6 end up in this sort of nether zone. I wrote a piece during one of the lockdown seasons about what I refer to as almost stars. So players that could be star players at Europa League clubs, but are trapped and are unwanted at Champions League clubs. So we are looking at players like, let's say, Jesse Lingard in his final days at Manchester United, who could have done a role for a number of clubs in the bottom half and lower down the table, but because he was on £100,000 a week, that made him prohibitively hard to move on a permanent deal. He ends up running down his contract and eventually going to Nottingham Forest. Or to use another former Manchester United player, Brandon Williams. Brandon Williams emerges in the 1920 season as a backup left back to Luke Shaw when Luke Shaw is injured, goes to the Europa League semi-final, and more than one Premier League club, I think particularly Southampton, tried to loan him after Luke Shaw returned. And when Manchester United asked for that club to go 50-50, I believe Southampton were incredibly surprised at how large Brandon Williams' wages were. So Raheem Sterling is on a very conservative estimate, north of £250,000 a week. Raheem Sterling has also played an astonishing amount of football. He is his age. He's also in his mid-30s in terms of footballing age because he's been around since 17, 18 years of age. And now when we're seeing a Premier League that is playing, looking to sign players younger and looking to get players when they are younger for a myriad of reasons. Some coaches say you want to get them in younger because, the accountants want to get them in younger because you can pay them cheaper. The coaches want to get them in younger because younger players are both more athletic and able to press and less, shall we describe, less stubborn and more open-minded to pressing as well. So if you're a football club and you can afford to pay a football player £250,000 a week, why would you pay that sum for someone like Raheem Sterling, who, while indeed a fantastic football player, I think Raheem Sterling's performances for England across Euro 2020 are some of the best individual performances I've ever seen from a player in an English shirt at a tournament. Sterling's played a lot of football, and you're going, why would I pay that much money in contracts for a player who is towards the end of his career rather than towards the start of his career? Very similar to Ben Chilwell. If you're a football club that can afford the £70,000 a week plus for his wages, you'd go, well, why would I pay that money for a left back who's had this many injuries and is this far along in his career when perhaps I can play a fraction of that price or half of that price per week on a player who is closer to 21? And I think that's how you end up with this nexus. Romelu Lukaku is a very, very good example of the sort of the Chelsea, the Premier League bomb squad, in that Lukaku, we now know Lukaku is a Serie A great. Okay. Put him in Italy, he eats. But when he was surplus the requirements of Chelsea, he was just in this half and half another zone because Inter Milan did kind of want him, but they couldn't afford him because his wages were this way. And then when Lukaku makes some ill-advised decisions, Inter Milan like, nope, then he has to go on loan to Roma. And it was only eventually when his release clause hit 35 million that Napoli came in. And I think that's happened to a lot of these players, particularly those in the top six, is that once you become a football player who's earning more than £150,000 a week, you can only really be bought or paid for by Premier League clubs in the top 10, shall we say, and a handful of clubs across Europe, which is why this is what you're seeing when David is talking about these loan opportunities. A lot of the clubs in Europe want to loan them because they go, well, we can't afford to pay 40 million and then also cover this person's wages. Can we just have a rental for now? I think and again, David's been working in this industry for a lot longer than I. I'd be really interested to get his thoughts on, has there been a rise in loans with obligations to buy or loans with opportunities to buy in the last 5 or 6, since COVID, I should say. COVID has had a huge impact on transfer dealings, and I think you're seeing the solution to a lot more bomb squad players being loan deals. That's my theory. I'm going to stop talking because David can then tell me if I'm right or wrong.
I don't have the numbers in front of me and haven't tallied up what Carl's asking, but he strikes at the heart of a really interesting topic because football is trying to now find post-COVID many more creative solutions than they were previously. And that brings into the conversation loan with option, loan with obligation, loan with conditional option, loan with conditional obligation if certain criteria are met. And a fascinating one was with David Raya from Arsenal, from Brentford to Arsenal.
Yes,
because that was more born on trust and an understanding that Arsenal didn't have the finance in place to do the deal financially at that point in time. So they took him on loan. But if it's a loan with a formal obligation to buy, that goes on the PSR financial fair play calculation now. And therefore it's the same really as a permanent transfer. It only helps you on cash flow because obviously the money's not going out until later, but it's hitting your books now. However, if you manage to reach an agreement with some kind of unwritten understanding that you will definitely make this permanent further down the line, and that trust is honoured, which it seems, with Arsenal and Brentford, then you can legally do a deal that is loan. The payment will come later, and then that helps you in your FFP, PSR, and accounting situation in the here and now. And so, that's being explored in different cases. You know, there were some reports about how Arsenal looking to do loan with obligation for Hincapié right now because it will help them in their PSR now. No. It will go on their PSR now unless you can do a Raya-style deal where the money is genuinely paid later. But it's going to take some bravery on the part of relationships to execute it. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points. Carl's touched upon like a Ben Chilwell, a Sterling. This whole pod has talked about bomb squads. So Chilwell is among a number of players who didn't even get used in the early friendlies when main top, senior players, the sort of relied upon individuals are coming back to fitness. So they've not had any football, and you're expecting clubs to say, yeah, come, we'll take you, we'll pay you handsome money, come play for us. We don't know about your fitness, we don't know about your match readiness. That's such a risk for them, and so it's almost counterproductive that a lot of them, like Chilwell, haven't even had the minutes in the legs, not even organised friendlies, some of them behind closed doors, empty stadium matches, just to almost prime them for transfers, which sounds OTT, but it's not, because this is important for your squad size and for your finances and to get players playing football. So you might see players like him, if nothing can be sorted in the next day, staying until January and then readdress the situation, or have their contracts cancelled by mutual consent, paid off, and then they go and ply their trade elsewhere as a free agent, sign outside of the window. Raheem Sterling, there will be interest in him, no doubt. There always is. Here he's training well in like more of a loans group, so it's not sort of horrible conditions. I don't know if they get to eat in the main building or whatever, but they're looked after.
He doesn't get the pasta, but he gets the potatoes. I get you. It's all good. Gotcha.
It's tough.
Exactly.
It's really tough when you talk about bomb squads. In France, they call it the loft. So Manchester bomb squad, yeah. And I often feel
it personally.
I'm not a fan of describing players as deadwood either, because so earlier in the summer we referred to a group of players as the Manchester United Five. So Sancho, Antony, Malacia, Rashford, Garnacho, and these players were told if you are not going to train with the main group, and we would prefer, if you are going to use Carrington's facilities, that you arrive after 5 o'clock, so you do not interact with the main group. And if you talk to players who have been in this sort of situation, it can be a really isolating experience. You are not using the facilities you've used all the time. You go to work and someone's sat at your desk. You try and log into something. Your password isn't used anymore. There's a photograph from Axel Disasi on Snapchat, and it's just captioned "life," and it's him with 2 or 3 other players in Chelsea's. We'll use the term bomb squad, and they're in a substantially smaller changing room, and they are using facilities that 2 or 3 people in the comment section have said they're comparable to me in Sunday League. That can be a really isolating experience. That can be a really difficult experience. Last summer, the PFA released a statement that urged guidance to Premier League clubs, saying, could you please stop using this bomb squad method to try and force players to move on, as these are employees, and they're saying it's an isolating experience. It's not a good way to train, as David had said. It is not a good way to put yourself in a shop window if you're training with the under-23s. You're not being afforded preseason games. You're not getting minutes. You're not being put in match day squads. You're barely getting mentioned by your manager in press conferences. How are you supposed to restart your career when the outside noise is saying you're not good enough? The counter argument to that is, for a lot of managers, historically, they like using bomb squads or lofts, or however you want to use it, to put a line in the sand and to sharpen their authority. Some players say once a bomb squad is created, if you're a player who's not in the bomb squad, you are more enthused or energized because you're like, oh, I'm one of this manager's person. I'm going to now do my hardest to make sure I don't end up in the bomb squad. But training the reserves is, you talk to ex-pros about it, and they often describe it as just being a very isolating and difficult experience, right? Because you've spent, since the age of 13, more or less, for a lot of these professional football players, their entire job is play football and playing football games, competitive football games. Yeah. And then for sometimes reasons outside your own control, you just left to your own devices until maybe a football club somewhere can do a loan. It's difficult.
Specifically on Sterling, I think from players' perspective, the onus is on Chelsea now in these final throes of the market to come forward with some proposals for him, and then he will make his decision. Why does he have that kind of power? It's because he's under contract for the next 2 years still, and it's his right. What we saw with Arsenal a year ago is that things might get sorted late. There's potentially a good and attractive financial deal to be done for clubs. That time round, Arsenal didn't pay a huge amount of the wages. It was mainly shouldered by Chelsea. I don't think there was even a loan fee. It didn't work out as planned. I think Sterling would probably say that was largely due to how late this evolved, without proper time for conversation with the manager, where he was going to play, Mikel Arteta, what role he would have, where on the pitch he would be deployed, and he would have liked that to have been different this time round, clearly. But here we are again, getting to this stage. I think for family reasons, his preference would be to stay in London, but that depends on the opportunities. If it doesn't materialise and attractive propositions come from abroad, maybe he does that. Maybe nothing materialises. And then we get back to the question of, do contracts get paid off? Do people wait until January and then readdress the situation? And so, yeah, it's one of many complicated outlooks on the market.
Okay, David, I'm going to ask you 2 questions before you have to go.
Absolutely.
First one has to be on Arsenal, really, because we're talking about outgoings. I mean, there's a whole heap of players rumoured to be surplus to requirements for now at Arsenal. Kiwior, Zinchenko, Fabio Vieira, Sambi Lokonga. Anyone remember him? What's the conversation there? Because they're buying, but they're not selling.
Yeah. Arsenal have done a huge amount of business inward, and it's pretty unprecedented and remarkable. A nod, I guess, to the ownership, who have continued to back the club in the market and spending significant amounts of money, and empowering director level in terms of Tim Lewis and then Andrea Berta, sporting director, fairly newly arrived still, Mikel Arteta with the resources, where many people have said, why don't you make this signing, spend some more money, it's just one signing away, why didn't you get a striker in January? And maybe they've reflected on that, and 3 second place finishes and no major piece of silverware since the 2020 FA Cup. And although there's no internal pressure on Mikel Arteta, they fully back him. They want to get over the line, and there is external pressure, a lot of expectation and anticipation on what Arteta will do this season. And it seems like they're not hanging about now. They're not waiting for tomorrow. They're not waiting for their next window. They're getting on with business now. So, yeah, we could see Hincapié arrive. That's something that's being worked on, but it's not done yet. And let's see if it does materialise before the deadline. It could go quite far down. They want him, he wants them, but there's €60 million release clause. By Leverkusen probably want that met. Efforts are being made to try and explore whether a lower fee that's deemed more realistic at this stage of the market can be satisfactory to all parties. And yeah, it will likely depend on space being made as well as finances. So Kiwior is being pursued by Porto. Is that going to get done positionally and financially? Clearly a relation to Hincapié. Zinchenko is a player who Arsenal for some time now would be open to the idea of him leaving, but will it develop? Who are the suitors? Do we have enough time? Does he want it to happen? And that focuses on Arsenal. That shows you that Arsenal have been looking to maybe add some greater quality on that left side, because Hincapié, yeah, he's a left-sided centre-back, but he can also play left-back, and he gets up the pitch as well. He overlaps. And yeah, exactly. And so even though you could point to a Calafiori and a Miles Lewis-Skelly, Calafiori has missed some time through injury. Lewis-Skelly, he's only had 1 season. He's very new to this, and it will take time to develop and bed in. Sometimes he can be, by youth and where he developed, be deployed in midfield as well, in a more central area. Eze, who they've signed, if they put him towards the left, he comes in typically. So you want someone who can go out. Hincapié is not a new target. He's been very high on Arsenal's recruitment list for some years now, even though he's still at a young age. And so, yeah, we've touched upon Kiwior. At the time of recording, no deal done, but it's clearly being worked on. We've touched on Zinchenko. I reported talks between Arsenal and Stuttgart over Fabio Vieira. It's clearly complicated on what Stuttgart are able to pay. And so then I think the parties were looking at maybe a loan with an obligation. But no resolution at this point in time. And are there going to be other scenarios potentially for him? He was on loan at Porto last season. Reece Nelson, Fulham were pursuing that situation. Obviously, they had him on loan last season. But you hear them linked with other targets. Is that moved away from the agenda? But then what else could open up for Nelson? Because there is interest from elsewhere. So there are possibilities in various parts of the pitch for Arsenal to recoup. Andrea Berta has understandably been credited and received significant praise for the way he's brought players into the club. But a test of a sporting director will be how you can move players on. And Arsenal haven't been prolific sellers. Many people have pointed out Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, the record sale at £35 million. There was Alex Iwobi too, that was a little bit less than that. But, what can they recoup and what movement could happen before the deadline? And I think that's a really important question for Arsenal. Now, their finances are in good shape. They've got plenty of headroom, or had, as recently as I knew, on the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. A little bit tighter on UEFA's squad cost regulations, which is calculated slightly differently. But as we said with Man United, there's also January and until June 20th, 2026. So a lot going on at Arsenal, and I think, the focus will be more on outgoings than incomings before the deadline. But we've got to keep an eye on the Hincapie situation. And when that window shuts, I think Arsenal will need to take a very deep breath on what they've done before then attacking all competitions with this impressive, deep squad that is showing strength in depth like we've never seen before. When there's injuries to somebody like a Saka and Odegaard, there's not a great deal of panic. When you've got like a Nwaneri and Eze, a Madueke, and so that's why people are saying sort of no excuses now. It's time to deliver.
You're talking about, end of the transfer window. I'm going to throw three names at you from Manchester City perspective in particular. Edison Ortega, what's happening there? And finally, is Donnarumma coming to Manchester City? That's all I need to know, David, before you let you go.
Edison would need to leave for Manchester City to sign a new goalkeeper unless, Ortega departed, but we don't know movement on that. There seems to have been rumblings of an Edison departure, but at the moment, City are counting on James Trafford and Edison as their first two keepers, and Ortega remains in the mix. Scope for movement there, but I don't know of anything just yet. That's where the Donnarumma interest comes. There's been some contact with PSG, but it's not said to be advanced yet. Certainly no agreement, and City are kind of saying it's not negotiations. It's that, we're aware of the situation. There's some dialogue between the clubs, semantics really. The word from PSG is that they think he will end up there. Maybe it goes down to the last minute of deadline day, but they think Donnarumma will end up at City. I don't know if that's wishful thinking. I don't know if it's because they've already said very public goodbyes. Maybe that's why they said their goodbyes, to try and sort of get this moving. They wanted around 40 million euros. City would be nowhere near that. Maybe there's a compromise that can be found. If they do reach an agreement, personal terms won't be an issue. They will find a solution. He's very handsomely paid, so maybe there are some issues, but I'm sure they'll get there. And there's every chance that doesn't materialize because
this is football.
It's football. He's got a contract at PSG until next year.
Yeah, but I swear he was saying his goodbyes this weekend. It felt like it's reached that point where the crescendo's hit, and
it's fine.
Didn't Emi Martinez say his goodbyes at Aston Villa?
This is also true. Also true, gents. Also true.
And then he looks like he'll be staying at Villa unless he enters this goalkeeping merry-go-round at the last minute. That would be fun.
Oh Lord.
So yeah, like, the goodbyes don't necessarily mean the deal is done. And we'll have to. It brings all manner of questions. Donnarumma, I think, is unbelievable. I've seen him live many times and admire him greatly. Saved PSG almost single-handedly against Arsenal in the Champions League semi-final second leg. But is he the right style for Pep Guardiola and the way he likes to play? Is he going to be first choice? James Trafford was told when he signed that he's likely to be the number one there. So that's a situation that needs to resolve.
Thank you so much for your time, man. Carl, David, of course. And thank you guys for watching as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and also leave us a comment as well. We'll be back soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anka, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.